Recording in progress.
Everybody here okay? If you're online, can you hear all right? Thank you, Danielle.
Yeah, you're good.
Thanks, Jen. Probably turn it down. All right, Andrew. Come take center stage. Andy's my co-host today. My what? No, I'll wait for you to finish your coffee.
Yeah.
Hi. If you're just joining, we're going to get started in just a minute. Talking about TISH inspections today. Okay, so while I'm waiting for Andy to finish adding sugar to his coffee, I'm going to get started. Come on, Andy. If you're online, I ask that you just mute so there's no feedback. Certainly unmute if you have a question or something that comes up, but if you wouldn't mind pressing the mute button, that would be great. Okay, I'm going to bring up our outline. Can everyone online see that? Hopefully.
Yes.
Okay, great. I'll do my best to watch for any new participants that come in. So. Okay. All right, so we're talking about TISH inspections today. And let's see. Go down one. You've likely experienced or been through this process with a buyer or seller before, but not everybody knows kind of what goes into a TISH inspection or the things that they look for. Is everybody here pretty familiar with the process or familiar with what goes in? No? Okay. There's a couple people who said no. How about everybody else? Yep. Okay, so first thing I want to do is have us define really what is it's called a few different things. It might be called a TISH inspection, truth in the sale of housing, or it might be called time of sale inspection, TOS, point of sale inspection. So you'll hear a couple different terminology, different terms used for that type of inspection. Identify what that is, what a certificate of approval or of code compliance is. The document that you get after the process is going to have a couple different titles depending on where it comes from or the community it comes from. And then also to talk a little bit more about sewer inspections. So that is becoming very commonplace. And I wanted to include a little bit in with this because there are certain communities that have made that a required inspection now, whereas it wasn't always the case. And then what is the difference in the type of sewer inspections, or what are they looking for specifically when it comes to the sewer inspections that are happening? So, Andy, you want to start just kind of going through it, or you want me to? We're arguing over podiums now. Come on up.
So, truth in housing reports, otherwise known as a TISH. Like Jelena said, some cities call it something else, but if you say TISH, everybody knows what you're talking about. And the differentiating factor with these is it's not necessarily an in-depth inspection like your private home inspection is going to be, mostly for health and safety stuff. So a lot of gas lines, plumbing, handrails is exceedingly common, stuff like that. Smoke detectors is a huge one. So
as we go through the outline, we're going to have a list of the most common things that are looked for
yeah, that is common
on those inspections. So,
and the gist is basically when it's completed or it passes, you are going to get a certificate. So as a buyer's agent, if you're in one of these cities, the question you really have to ask is, do the sellers have their certificate if they don't have it posted? Which they're supposed to, but I'd say if you did a random search in any of these cities, I'd say 70% maybe have them. Roughly. So don't be that guy. But once you have your certificate, that means you're all set. There's no conditions or required repairs, and you are good to go.
everybody understands too that a time of sale inspection or a TISH inspection is completely different than a buyer's home inspection.
Completely different.
So buyer's home inspection, that is done at will by the buyer at their discretion. TISH inspection is required by the municipality that governs that particular town. So there are 13, I believe, or there was 13. I have a list coming up of communities that require that type of inspection. The certificate that comes with that is presented to the buyer in communities where it's required prior to closing, unless the buyer's agreed in writing that they're going to assume repairs. And this is documented with the governing city. So it is attached to the property in all cases, just like a permit that would be pulled on a property for work being done and then closed up for repair.
Yep. So these are supposed to be required to be done before you even list the house for sale. And there are fines and penalties for not doing that. That being said, this seems to be more of a suggestion in a lot of cases. Or a lot of you probably run into people that are in one of these cities and you say, hey, where's the listing agent goes, oh, shoot.
Yeah.
Didn't realize that was required. So it happens more than you think. Yeah. But it's supposed to be done before you even list the house for sale, and a copy is supposed to be left at the property.
You don't have to have the repairs completed prior to going live with your listing, but the inspection and a report is just like a seller's disclosure at the time that they're touring the property, and acknowledgement of that included with the purchase agreement.
So this just needs to be part of your listing timeline. Yeah. Yeah. Again, like I said, technically you're supposed to, but most people treat it as a suggestion. So a lot of people just post the certificate on supplements. Yeah. Yeah, realistically, nobody's going to have an issue if you just put the certificate in the supplements.
But the report is required to be furnished. It's not like a home inspection report where it's owned by the person who completes it. It's a city required report. And again, that report is actually attached to the property. So it, like Minneapolis, for instance, if you go on their city website and you look under their section on truth and sale of housing, you look up the actual property like information. It's going to have the report and it's going to have the certificate of approval. So you can get an electronic copy that way. So it is something, it's like a disclosure, and it should be treated like a disclosure. Addressing all those repairs is great, but I want you to remember what goes into those reports now. It's a lot more than just the details of the property. Some communities are requiring that there's an energy efficiency report. It's going to tell you about insulation levels. It's going to give suggestions to new owners on how they could improve the insulation or the energy efficiency of the home. So all of that in there is really designed for the new owner. It's like a disclosure.
To that point, whoever does the inspection has to send a copy immediately to the city, so they'll have an electronic version of it. It's like closing a permit. So you can, so if the listing agent's difficult to communicate with, you can just call the city and say, hey, I need it. Where are we at with this? And then like
sewer scope. You didn't read my outline, did you?
I did. Quit overstepping.
Checking.
As Jelena mentioned previously, some cities require sewer and groundwater inspections, and then we've got a list down here. Also, alternatively, this is not an endorsement of Structure Tech, but Structure Tech is just a company that happens to be certified in all of these cities. So if you just go to their website, they keep a running update. Because since COVID, a handful of cities have no longer required these. So it's always changing, and what types of properties.
Yeah. So, yeah, can I go up here? I want to go up.
West St. Paul.
Um, so there's going to be an update on this list. I've researched several different websites and cities on what's required. That is one of the run us. Are you trying to take a picture? Okay, Andy, can I come up here real quick? Sorry, you're just kind of all over the place. Everybody knows what happens on a sewer scope, correct? Where they're using a flexible camera to go in, take pictures of the sewer line, look at the conditions from the inside out. There's typically a live video. A lot of times that video is able to be published. A lot of people are requesting sewer inspections now on properties, even if they're not required. I wanted to highlight in here that it is not, sewer inspections are not intrusive testing. Now the exception is like if the water main is not accessible or the sewer main is not accessible. In most cases they are. And I would advise you to tell your clients, if you're working with sellers, to make sure that that's accessible in the event it comes up on inspection and someone wants a sewer scope, because they don't have to write a sewer scope specifically into the purchase agreement. It's really just opening that drain cover and then doing the scope. So.
If you look at the list,
For the ones that require the, do you have the ones that require those?
I do, yep. So these are all the cities. There's an order to the outline, so I'm just going to follow the outline. These are all the cities that are currently requiring TISH inspections of some kind, right? And it might be a requirement that's just related to sewer, which will be further down in the outline, and I'll send a copy of this out to everybody so you have it for your records as well. You can see on this list here that all of the communities require a little bit, there's a little bit of difference in what each of these require for the type of dwelling. So Bloomington, it says single family, duplex, multifamily, condominiums, townhomes, and mobile homes, right? In Golden Valley, it's all properties, residential and commercial, where it's required. Some might just say all dwellings. In Minneapolis, first-time condominium conversions, right? That's the only time that this has come up on the list, is that one for first-time condominium conversions. So if you're selling a condo that is listed for the first time and it used to be an apartment, keep that in mind. Like, they are required to have a TISH done at least for that first sale. Mm-hmm. Yep, and energy efficiency score is on there as well. West St. Paul is listed as all dwellings. They may have changed that, but they definitely require a sewer scope as well. And then there's a couple communities that aren't on here on this for TISH, but are definitely on here requiring sewer inspection. And I want you to know that for both buy sake and for listing side. If you're working with buyers, you should get a copy of that report so your clients know what going to it. If it is a seller, you want to make sure that you're compliant and you have that done before the listing goes on the market. Some of these communities are getting really fine happy, right? And St. Paul, if you don't follow their process, you're subject up to 90 days in jail and $1,000 fine. It's going to vary by community, whether they choose to enforce it or not. Yeah, but the homeowner. Yeah, so it's like a disclosure obligation of the seller. So not on the agent. These cities are no longer requiring TISH inspections. So if you previously sold in this area, or you've been working with buyers in these areas and you were looking for copies of the TISH, know that those have changed and they're not required anymore. Robbinsdale, that change came pretty quickly. So for anybody who's selling, closer to Minneapolis and Robbinsdale, it's not required anymore. I want to talk a little bit about excess water runoff and ground infiltration. So these are the cities that are requiring sewer inspections, and there's a difference between these two things. So for educational purposes, I want you to know what they are. First, excess water runoff is when rain and melting snow overflows the ground too quickly and it can't be absorbed. So it floods the sewer systems, especially in cities with lots of concrete. If you remember last week, we talked about impervious surface requirements on our land training. That's one of the reasons why there are requirements like that, just to prevent excess or lack of water runoff. And what this can do is it can cause untreated sewage to sometimes spill out into nature. Anyone ever driven in through a smelly community before? Don't want to know why? Newport is one of those cities. If you are driving between Cottage Grove and Woodbury down 61 and you've been by Newport, you might be familiar with some smell. And it's not just the tanning plant that's on the other side of the river in Evergrove Heights. Yes. And so now they are one of the communities that is requiring a sewer scope for the purpose of excess water runoff. Ground infiltration is where the sewer water means when sewage leaks out of broken or poorly sealed pipes and gets into the soil and underground water. And it can pollute the environment and it's harmful to health. Minneapolis, if you've been showing homes, you'll see huge sections of the sidewalk that are brand new. Because all of that was galvanized steel and the infrastructure is old, all of those pipes are rusting out. They're disconnecting and they're washing off into the ground, and you're getting sewage that literally is polluting the ground and it contaminates the groundwater, and that can lead problems depending on, you know, what happens with the ground, washing it out, etc. I had a client who sold 46 in Portland 3 years ago now, and their sewer pipe totally disintegrated and washed out the entire base underneath their basement, leading to a 4-foot gap between their basement slab. And they had to have their whole sewer line replaced, and then a company come in and backfill all of that to be able to level out. And it did significant damage. The sewer pipe that disintegrated. So there's a reason these cities are requiring.
It's basically the city sewer equivalent to why most septic systems fail. You know, words over the drinking water.
Right. That's right. These are the communities that are requiring sewer scopes for one reason or another. And you actually brought up a really great point about being closer to lakes and the effects of that. Within the last, I think it's 5 years now, the city of Waverly, which is way out off 12, but if you work on the west side, maybe you've shown homes there, they now require a sewer scope for every single sale. Tonka Bay is another one. Maple Lake is another one. Some of these have been added in the last few years because of the fact that they're on lakes or that they have a higher water table. So if you have a busted sewer line, and that's, you know, at least 4 feet down below the frost line, and you have a higher water table, it's more likely that that sewage is going to run off and pollute the groundwater. And if they're drawing on that water at all for like their city water sources, that's when you risk cross-contamination. Any questions before kind of moving on? Nope. Okay. Helping sellers prepare for TISH inspections. So I think we can do our due diligence if we know the communities where it's required and we know what's most commonly looked for. How can we help our sellers prepare for that? And these are the most common repairs that are looked at. Oh, I got my 2 is red. I'll have to fix that. But these are the 3 most common repairs that people are inspectors are looking for. So missing inoperable smoke detectors and carbon monoxide alarms. Can anyone tell me what the expiration is on smoke detectors and carbon monoxide detectors? Good job, Kelly. 10 years. So if they've been in the house for a while and they have not replaced those, it's actually considered code. So if an inspector comes through and sees they're outdated or they're missing, they're definitely going to put it on there that you've got to replace them. That's a quick and easy way to address the safety issue in the house. Carbon monoxide detectors. Does anybody know the requirements for how many or where they are located within the home? Every bedroom, and in a hallway or outside of a bedroom, and within like the furnace room. So always look for those particular areas. You want something that's located near your furnace for carbon monoxide output. You want something that is located in the hallway outside of the bedrooms, And then most smoke detectors are like a carbon monoxide smoke combination detector. So put those into your inspections too, if you're requesting that those be changed out, even if it's not in a community where it's part of a TISH. Just in representing your buyers, you can have the combinations detectors in the bedrooms. Missing backflow preventers. I put a definition in here for you guys. I don't want to get too sidetracked with it, but backflow preventers are used to make sure dirty water doesn't flow back into clean water, basically. And here are the 3 most common areas that you would find those. On the hose bibs or irrigation systems, it's to keep bacteria, sediment, and chemicals used on lawns from seeping back into the city water supply. The water main into the house, and then anywhere that potable water or drinking water connects to non-potable water, such as like an HVAC system, manufacturing or outdoor sprinkler systems. So just keep an eye on those particular areas, or tell your sellers that they can look for backflow preventers in those areas. It did not used to be code for a lot of these older homes, but they are now. Technically, a seller can have that replaced themselves. They have to, it's plumbing, right? So that fixture, they're going to want to pull a permit for it. But I just recommend seeking a professional to help know where the best place is to retrofit those on houses. So if your client is looking for it and they don't have one, seek professional help. Leaking plumbing. So tip is to check for leaks, fill up a sink or tub, pull out the stopper, watch to see if there's any water runoff below. How many times have you been on showings where you've opened up a cabinet in a bathroom or a cabinet in a kitchen and you see that the board underneath it is all bubbled up? You know that there was a leak in there at some point. If you are anything like me, your kitchen sink is completely stuffed with cleaning supplies and garbage bags and pods for the dishwasher. And sometimes you might not know that that's pressing on a fixture in there. So if you're working with the seller, just encourage them to look in those specific areas for leaks. You'll get called out on the TISH report, and it's much easier to fix beforehand. Other required and commonly recommended repairs, electrical items. You can look for double taps or open electrical boxes without cover plates. If there's where a light fixture should be in the ceiling, you have to have something there. If there's not a light fixture there, you can't just have an open electrical box. You have to have a cover plate or something on it at least. Outlets, you can't just have open outlets where there's no cover plates and things on it. So little simple fixes like that, which are really easy and cheap for a seller to do themselves, will prevent it getting called out on a report and then having to have a reinspection after the fact. Gas piping, you can look for proper ventilation and marked shutoff valves. So again, they're making sure that the CO2 is like being there's no leaks in the plumbing, or that the CO2 is venting out properly. So if a person really wanted to, my dad used to do this, he would get like soapy water and he would pour it over some of the fixtures. And if there's a leak, it will start to bubble the soap. And so you'll see a bubble in it. And that's a way to tell if there's a leak on a plumbing fixture. Furnace boilers, again, looking for venting and proper discharge on high efficiency units. The high efficiency units are a big deal, and they get called out a lot actually, because there is a condensation tube that comes off of the high efficiency furnace. And you will see that most of the time it's connected to a drain in the floor in the utility room. Code actually states that has to be raised a certain degree off of the floor. I think it's 1 inch. It's minor. But the whole purpose of that is so that bacteria can't come up through the drain and connect to that water supply as well and circulate through the air system. So something that simple is like they have little plastic blocks you can get, or fittings that hook right onto the drain itself that they're designed to like hold the hose across it. Yep. We did, yeah, we covered that. We covered that in our training in January. You better know by now, guys. I hope. No, good reminder. So gas appliance venting, again, CO2 detection is an important thing on that. Making sure that you have the right type of plumbing per code. Sometimes you'll see people have decided to use PEX for maybe their their gas line. That's not going to be code in all communities. I think you have to use copper. So just making sure that all of that is code, especially if they've done any remodel work themselves. Water heaters, again, proper venting. They'll look for the slope on the venting unless it's a high efficiency unit. And then they're looking for leaking and corrosion as well. Like if you're all rusted out on the bottom pan of your water heater, that might get called out on a TISH report, especially if there's any sign of leaking. Gas closed dryers, another one. Dryer vents, they can't have kinks in them. There has to be a certain amount of airflow because they can start fires in a house, so it's considered a safety hazard. And you need to make sure that that line is free of buildup. So if they look at the trap on the outside and it's just corroded, it's going to get called out. So if you're having someone clean vents, I always recommend to all of my clients, just as part of home maintenance, every 2 to 3 years, they should be having their dryer vent cleaned out anyway. So just do that proactively if you're going to be selling your property. And then fire separation at the garage. I am seeing this, I've seen this a lot more. Yeah. So now code says that you have to have firewall separation in the garage with sheetrock or drywall, which you did not have to have before. And that allows for rapid fire expansion into the upper level of like a home or within the roof of a home. So there has to be a complete close off fire separation. If there's an attic access panel in there or something like that, it just has to meet code for being fire sealed. So if you've got someone who's decided, hey, we cut a big hole in our sheetrock in the garage just so we can stuff stuff up into the rafters, if there's no door or closure on that, that's going to get called out for fire separation. Okay, how the process works. Probably familiar with this, but we'll just go over it quickly. You can look up your local city's government or administrative website, search for TISH or TOS inspections or point of sale. POS is another one. Another option is to call the city planning and inspections department. They're usually the ones who oversee this. Most require the inspection to be completed by a licensed inspector with that city. So just because someone is an inspector does not mean they are qualified to complete a TISH report for the city. There's actually a licensing process for a lot of those cities, and you have to be on a roster of approved inspectors. That pre-approved inspectors list is available with contact information on most city websites. Some cities have inspectors or staff that they contract with, and the city will assign the inspector. So St. Louis Park is an example of that. They don't
That's
even
the only one I could think of that has their own
department for it. I thought Hopkins was the same, but for St. Louis Park, they don't even call it time of sale. It's a point of sale, or is it a property maintenance inspection? It has a unique term. That's the only one. They're also the most difficult community I've ever dealt with for TISH reports. Yeah, just terrible. Plan a little extra time for that and random things getting called out, not just on the initial inspection, but if there are work orders, when they come back, they can look for other things. 3 times. And every time they came back, they found something new that you had to do. Wow.
I remember a case where somebody bought a house a year ago and got their new TISH inspection. And it has a dozen new items. And they said, well, we just bought the house a year ago. They didn't have any of it.
Code update or something like that with the community.
Yeah, it's inspected with a different seminar.
Yeah, I think the takeaway from all these comments, guys, for you is don't wait until the day before the listing goes live to have your client do this inspection. Okay, it is something worth being proactive about, even more so than like a seller's disclosure. Give them the opportunity to get all of those repairs done in advance if they can, because it certainly looks good if you're disclosing the report and you already have your certificate of approval. It's one less thing for buyers to negotiate on a property as well. Most are within a year. Yeah. Fees range from $150 to $350 from what I've seen. Prices are always going up and changing, so it might even be more than that. And they are paid by the homeowner. So it's not something where it's provided as a free service through the city, just so you guys are aware. The inspector is going to conduct an inspection similar to a private home inspection. They have a series of things that they have to look for, which is a little bit different than a home inspection. They have to check off every one of those things in a list. Most have that required format that they have to use for reporting. The inspector is going to complete the report and submit a copy of that to the city. And then either the city or the inspector will furnish a copy of that report that itemizes all of those areas and any required repairs. If no repairs are required, that's when a certificate of approval or a certificate of code compliance is going to be issued. Some cities will keep an electronic copy, as I mentioned before, as part of public records. Minneapolis is really good for that. If you don't see it on supplements or you want a history of the property, especially if it's a flip or something like that, they should have electronic copies of all closed permits, TISH reports, and COAs, or certificate of approval.
If the city doesn't tell me that it's a will.
There you go. If repairs are required, the seller's going to need to complete them prior to closing the sale of the home, or they can do it prior to the house going on the market if they prefer. Now, the preference here is not in having the report done and disclosing it. The preference is in completing required repairs. There's nothing that says you have to complete the repairs prior to it going on the market, because how many times have you seen a note online under agent remarks that says buyer to assume all repairs? It really depends on the seller and the condition of the property.
Used to be mandatory for the sellers to fix them.
So it's actually really nice now that the
Buyers have the ability at least to send it.
Yep.
Not fine, we'll take care of it. But
And the next point down, I'm going to talk a little bit more about that as well. But once the seller completes the repairs, they will call the city, and it's typically the same inspector who completed the original inspection that's going to come back to do a follow-up inspection. The inspector will then issue the certificate of approval permitted it passes. Now, again, my one recommendation is be very careful when it comes to St. Louis Park. I had the most interesting thing happen to me last year in my history of real estate, where buyers negotiated repairs on our listing, and then they decided the easy way to fall within, they had part of the purchase agreement said they would only request big ticket items valued at $1,500 or more. So we came to terms on our contract and what my seller would agree to for repairs. And then the buyer's agent decided to go to the city of St. Louis Park and say, can you please go back and check 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and furnished a copy of the buyer's private inspection report to them. My clients got a call out of nowhere saying, we need to come back and re-inspect your property, and showed up with a laundry list of additional items that we then were supposedly having to repair in order to get the certificate of approval. But because the client was bound to the contract, we were able to work it out where they now were required to assume those repairs. So they screwed themselves over because they got a timeline on it. But it was, yeah, very interesting experience. Never put anything past an agent on the other side of the transaction. We all have to represent our buyers, but when it comes to that particular community, just be careful because they're a little bit notorious when it comes to property maintenance and those reports. She was told that this is an ethics violation. She owed honesty to all parties and that she was going to get sued. So, and that is what it took to convince her to get her buyers to agree to assume the remaining repairs that came out, because they only came out due to them in the first place.
But if they're wondering, so I really enjoyed that.
I sure did. Sue, we talked about it. Yes. Sue Nelson or Sue Carlson? Okay, maybe it's Nelson. Yeah, and she was so super friendly, but we pushed it. Just be careful. Just be careful. Yes. Yeah. How'd that, it was hell? No, I don't know. It was hell, is that what you just said? David apparently has worked with that same agent as well, and so did Kelly. And it was really fast. Yeah, and I was like, beware. Yeah, I just don't believe in trying to sabotage deals that way. So just be careful when it comes to stuff like that. Okay, moving on real quick. When the buyers assume repairs, so the buyer's going to be required to inform the city in writing that they're assuming repairs. They can't just say they're going to. There's always something that's required. Some will say, hey, we just need an email that comes directly from them. We need a copy of the purchase agreement. Others may have a form that they specifically have to fill out that can be electronically signed and sent in. The city of Bloomington requires that you show up in person and you sign in person. And I believe it's notarized with the government there. Yeah. So this is why the best thing you could do proactively as a seller's agent or a buyer's agent is just understand what communities have what requirements don't be afraid to make a call and ask those questions.
Well,
Hi, Tiana.
but on that note too, if you're listing a house in Golden Valley, don't be afraid to pull up, look at other active lists, pull up a TISH report from that city so you can show your sellers. Here's the checklist. Here's what they're going to be. Here's what they're going to be looking.
Great idea. That's really good advice. If you didn't hear what Andy said, he was saying basically pull up another listing in that community and use the TISH report that they have on file as an example of what would be looked for.
They are all different.
And it varies from inspector to inspector as well. Okay, there's usually a timeline completing these repairs. So a buyer is going to have between 30 and 90 days, depending on the city, to complete all required repairs. It may be 120 in a couple of them where they've added a little bit more leniency. I would say most common I've seen is within 90 days to complete repairs.
It could be negotiable too. You know,
Don't plan on it, but
I have yet to negotiate that, but maybe Andy has
I'm just
chief in that department.
Let's say you're going to take on your house because you don't have your woodpecker damage. Exactly 60 days.
Yeah.
So here's a contractor that's doing it.
weather dependent, whatever.
Something like that. That's a good point. Some communities are a little bit more strict on it. So just make sure that you are doing your due diligence. You are informing your buyer of what it is that they're taking on when they agree to assume those repairs, that they want to check for with the city themselves on any timelines that are involved and what is the process for requiring a reinspection. There are some consequences, or can be, if buyers do not complete repairs on time, especially if it's items that are really related to bringing a property up to code. So it can result in violations from the local building or health departments. It can lead to fines and legal actions. You can actually lose part of your coverage from your homeowner's insurance if you have not completed those repairs, or all of it for that matter. And it could affect the property's habitability or the buyer's ability to use the property as intended. So I'll give you an example. I sold a property in Minneapolis 5 years ago, complete and epic disaster. The property had suffered significantly from when they were doing the 35W and Highway 62 overpass area where those two connect. And there is a small group of properties down there where they were driving pylons into the ground. And because of the age of the home, it started to erode the foundations that were limestone on a lot of these houses, leading to major gaps in flooring. The property that we sold was sold to an investor. The investor had 90 days to complete all the repairs that were on that list, and he did not do it in enough time for flipping that property. So there was a notice put on the door for that investor saying that they had basically lost their
Go to jail.
no, not going to jail, but until all the repairs were completed, there was not a certificate of occupancy on the property. So you could not have anybody living on site in that home until they had completed all the repairs and the process was done. So in some cases, they really do take this stuff seriously. Our job is just to inform buyers and make sure that they can make an informed decision. And that's all I got for this, unless Andy wants to add anything else to the mix, or we have time for a few questions.
I heard you say it lasts a year. Like if you have a seller where they're probably gonna have, if they do it, it's for a year.
Typically, yeah. It's going to vary by community. 6 months to a year. Most cases I've seen is a year. I would always just double check with the city.
When do you have like a rule of thumb or like a time you usually think that's to complete that? Like if you have a salary.
What I was going to say earlier is this becomes, it creates much more potential problems if you're trying to list the house in 3 days. And it's that required one. So if you're accustomed to doing a 2 or 3 week thing and getting this done right away, you're going to eliminate 95% of the time.
And it's like it's selling within a year.
I still, there's no benefit really.
Other than, finding out if there's anything glaring that's going to need to be fixed.
But,
I don't recommend doing it too soon, but also not. Yeah, if it is like a newly remodeled home and they pulled permits and everything looks good, I'm probably doing that 2 weeks to a month before we go online. If I don't anticipate that there's repairs my clients would have to do. If it's a house that needs work and things, like I'm probably recommending they're doing that a few months out just so they have time to address any repairs that are required.
If it's something that's 5-6 months out, pull an existing TISH so you can give them a guideline.
Yeah.
You know, this is what they're looking for. If there's anything that's glaring on this, let's talk about it. But this is what they're going to be checking when that time comes.
But somewhat, what if there's, what if you have a seller where they're like, I'm not, like, they know they need to do something and they don't do it?
Yep. So I would put in public remarks, you're disclosing that buyer to assume all repairs. So that it's part of a purchase agreement that you accept and you want it in writing in your purchase agreement that a buyer will assume all repairs on the TISH report.
Which is definitely not uncommon either. So
What if the buyers don't agree with that? And then you have sellers like, I'm doing that.
then that buyer's not going to buy your house.
Correct.
So your buyer pool is going to be smaller.
Yeah.
But if you don't have the 12 grand to bring your house up to spec, then we got to price it accordingly and
It can also
find a buyer that'll do it.
it can also be a negotiating tactic.
Yeah.
So if I price my house accordingly and someone's coming in with a low ball offer and I don't really, like, hey, we can come to terms at this price, but that means you're doing all repairs on this report. I'm not investing any more into it. You can always use that as a negotiating tactic as well.
Keep in mind, like we talked about last week in the mortgage training, there's loan products that will allow for that too. So if the buyer's turned off by a deal, well, I don't have that either 10,000, whatever it is. Well, there's a loan specifically for that. There might be grants from that city too. So someone's got to do it. Someone's got to do them. You just got to agree who it's going to be.
Yep. Go ahead, Kelly.
But I always do is like, because I have home in the TISH community, if there isn't a TISH on the listing, in like your multiples or whatnot, like I would ask for it, but if it's not available, if they haven't done it yet, it's always write in your offer in order to obtain a certificate. They have to get it done and have to fix the thing. And click contracts.
That's great.
Like, I'm gonna write that in just they might be like, if it's not, if there isn't a
It's a good point, actually.
You guys didn't hear it. Like Ashley said, click contracts just already has an option where if that's the case, you can just click it. So, well, not always. Sometimes it just falls through the cracks completely, but more often than not, it's going to be. Probably have to touch. That's going to be the leak. It's going to be a headache.
Yeah.
Another thing Boucher told us to do was like take all the bags of mulch and move them away from the house so that it's just like follow the wood siding. It's like a dollar amount on like having everyone that's not occupied property. So it's like a handyman for $6 an hour is gonna come do that. But then you have to escrow for 1.5 times. And it's like all these little things. So it's like escrowing for anything TISH related, I've always experienced.
And they want time and a half.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, like with the handyman stuff.
And St. Louis Park, because of Sarah's sharing an example of like how a listing in St. Louis Park made it particularly difficult for escrowing for repairs. That is the one community where I'm just encouraging everybody, have your TISH done plenty of time in advance to take your sweet time getting those repairs done and try to get a certificate of approval before or COCC before you go on the market. So ridiculous stuff called out. Absolutely ridiculous stuff.
No, there's nothing that says it's going to be enjoyable or fun.
No, so
But it is required.
on my TISH report in St. Louis Park, I had a small section of my client's yard, my seller's yard, that did not have chain link fence on it, just like one section, and that was left out intentionally to access the park behind the house. There is no code that requires that a fence be on any property, but apparently if you have a fence on a property, it has to be fully enclosed. So they called out this little teeny section and we had to have someone come out and put chain link fence up to close that off, and in St. Louis Park. And if they want to access the park, they have to put in a proper gate. So just like that particular community is a little ridiculous.
I would make one more suggestion. So like, like Jelena mentioned, most of these cities have a list of approved inspectors. A lot of those inspection companies, they're not individual inspectors, they're inspection company. A lot of them are on all of them.
So if you find one that you like,
Stick with them and chances are they can do any city.
That's great advice.
So you don't get any surprises.
Okay, any other questions at all before we wrap it up for the day? Oh, I got 5 in the chat. I'm sorry, let me check here. 10 foot from benches. Good job, Danielle, on that. Okay, I think we covered everything that was in the chat. If there's no other questions, we'll be starting team meeting here in about 10 minutes. So we'll see all of you back then, okay? Reach out to your fellow agents if you have questions or help. Your sales coordinators are awesome with their experience in real estate. They're a resource for you to tap into as well. Don't do that, Andy. You're great. Okay, see you later, guys. Have a great day. Bye-bye.